Hi everyone, it's Nicki here, and I am back with you for another little look at some of the books that I've been reading. So today I'm going to share the books that I've read during January, which puts us back on track after my time away at the end of last year. I'm not sure if you can hear the rain. It's been 40 degrees over the weekend and it was really humid this morning, and now finally the skies have opened. We've got a bit of rain, so I have got the door open just to try and cool the house down. So apologies if you can sort of hear the patter and there might be a tiny bit of traffic noise, but hopefully it won't disturb us too much. So I read 12 books in January, which is puts me about on track for where I want to be with my Goodreads goal for the year, which is going to be 150 books. So without further ado, let's have a look at some of them. The first one I read was Sacrificed to the Dragon by Jessie Donovan. This is a book I picked up for free on Kobo and took with me overseas during my trip. I gave it 3 stars. It's a paranormal romance. I really enjoyed the world building. There's this idea that there's dragon shifters and humans, and they have an uneasy truce, and the dragon shifter numbers are down. So human women and men, I assume, there's a woman in the story, but can offer themselves as a sacrifice, and they'll go and mate with the dragons and live with them if they're successful in conceiving, or have the baby, and then that's the end of the contract. And in return, they'll often get dragon blood, which has a lot of healing properties. And so our female heroine in this story has a sick brother whom she wishes to heal with this dragon blood, so she signs up. And it turns out the dragon she's been paired with is a brooding, Byronic hero type. You know the sort that I mean, it's that sort of story. I did love the concept. I thought the world building was good, but I did have some niggles with the pacing. It seemed to stop and start a lot. There were some really great action scenes, and then you kind of just felt that you were like flipping pages for a while. And also the prose just didn't really appeal to me. The writing style, it just felt a bit, I don't want to say dull, that's not quite the word, but it never captivated me, perhaps we'll say. And the characters were pretty stereotypical and followed their paths as you'd expect. So if you're into paranormal romance and you like the idea of dragon shifters, then it's probably worth checking out. But if you've got a whole ton of books like that already, this isn't one I put at the top of the list to read. So moving swiftly on, we come to a completely different book, because it's one I borrowed from my mother just because I needed something else to read before I left. It's called I Let You Go by Clare Mackintosh. And it's a sort of psychological thriller, I guess you'd say. It's going to be really hard. I don't really want to say too much about the story, because it's one of those stories where if you accidentally say the wrong thing, you give away the whole plot. So I don't want to fall into that trap. But let's just say there is a woman who's lost her child in a terrible accident, and there's a policeman who's trying to get to the bottom of the case. And so we sort of hear the story through different narrators' voices relating different events that have happened, including going back into the past and looking at some of the things that led up to the moment. It was a really compelling story, although it's not the sort of thing I read all the time. I got into it, I enjoyed the characters, it was well paced, and I gave it 4 stars. Moving on to a few non-fiction pieces. First of all, Dining with the Victorians by Emma Kay, which was a book I received from my parents for Christmas and read while I was over there. Really interesting. It's looking at, obviously from the title, food during the Victorian era, both what the rich were eating, what the poor were eating. There's a few recipes thrown in. It should have been a really awesome book. However, it was let down by some truly appalling grammar. And considering this is a professionally published book, I thought the amount that slipped through, you know, an odd typo, you think, oh well, but the amount that slipped through on this one was quite bad. Particularly like bad placing of commas. There was one sentence that stands out so much that I still remember it, and they were talking about how in the Victorian era there'd been large families. So children had been used to growing up in big family groups. However, the way the commas were placed and the way the sentence read, it basically said that because they grew up in big families, the children were large. Like giant children, because they grew up in big families. Which is obviously not what the author meant, but that's what it read as. So that really let it down, so I only gave it about 3.5 stars. If not for that, it probably would have been 4. The next one, The Complete Guide to Soap Making by David Fisher. Now this is one I got off NetGalley. I've never done soap making, and I just thought, well, it'd be interesting to have a read. I'm always on the lookout for new interesting hobbies, and I'm quite crafty. So I figured I'd have a look. I mean, I think it's probably put me off a little bit because there is a bit involved, but if you're interested in giving it a go, you want to try making your own soaps, this is definitely a really great resource. Everything's laid out, really easy to follow instructions, looking at all the different ways you can go about soap making. There's some really nice ideas about presentation as well. So it was a 4-star read for me. Very useful book if this is the sort of thing you're interested in. Now, the next book I read is a book for which I must do a shout out to my friend Sarah. She bought it for me for Christmas. She said I'd like it, and it is one of only 5-star reads for this month. So, you know, she knows my taste pretty well. It's called A Curious Beginning, and it's the first book in the Veronica Speedwell series by Deanna Raybourn. It's an historical mystery, if you like, a bit of a detective story, but with a bit of historical romance thrown in. The story was really gripping. Again, it's one of those, I don't want to give too much away, but there's a secret in Veronica's past, and she has to find out what that's about, what's happening before the bad guys catch up with her. And she makes friends along the way, including the potential love interest. The characters were delightful. I enjoyed the really witty banter between them. Great prose, such easy reading. As I said, 5 stars. Next up is Thorns and Fangs, book 1 in a series by Gillian and Kevern. This is an LGBT story that I received from NetGalley, and I gave it 3.5 stars. Now, it's a paranormal romance, and I thought the concept was brilliant. There's vampire characters, there's also a sort of sense of characters with magical abilities. Werewolves, sort of, but they're a little bit less important, but necromancy plays an important role as well. It was a really great idea, and I loved the plot. However, I never really connected with the characters. Taking individually, I quite like them both, but when they brought the characters together, it just never gelled for me. I never really felt the attraction. It felt sometimes like we were rehashing the same scene between them several times throughout the story. So it just never quite came together. Wonderful elements, but it didn't really form a cohesive whole, just for me anyway. So 3.5 stars, as I said. It was still a good read, so if you're into and you're into paranormal, you like a little bit of a different twist on the vampire story, then you'd probably enjoy it. But again, it's just not one that I'd put top of my list if I were making recommendations. The next book is another Christmas book, this one from my in-laws, Poe Bakes 100 Greats. So this is Poling Yeow's bakery cookbook. They know that I'm not much of a dinner cooker. I don't really like making meals, but I do enjoy cakes and biscuits and that sort of thing and make them from time to time. So this is a 4-star book for me. It's a really nice collection. There's definitely a few I'll try out there. However, the only thing that puts me off it is that so many of her recipes require a ton of ingredients, and I'm not someone who keeps a cupboard stocked with all types of flour, etc. all the time. I just buy them when I need them, so I'm not using them that often. So it would be quite an investment for me to make some of this stuff, because I'd have to go out and buy 98% of the ingredients. I wouldn't just have them on hand. So that was the only sort of slight letdown, but I will definitely be trying a few in the future. Coming back to NetGalley and another non-fiction book, Creating Celtic Knotwork by Cari, Buziak. Now this is a 4-star read for me. It's basically a step-by-step guide on how to draw Celtic knots and Celtic designs, as you see in the Book of Kells and the like. It was really easy to follow instructions, a nice blend of pictures and information. It teaches you everything from the basic knots to the more complex designs, including animals, how to draw the sort of human type figures in those intricate patterns as well. So if you're into art and design and you like that sort of Celtic style, then this is probably a book you'll want to check out. Next up, another read that I got free from Kobo, and this is Reunion. It's from the Vampire's Realm series. It's 3.5 in that series by Felicity Heaton. This is a 3-star read for me. as you may remember from last month, I read a few Felicity Heatons towards the end of last year, and generally they do get around the three-star mark from me. On the whole, they're fine stories, they're okay, but they don't grip me completely. They always feel just a little bit familiar, like it's just the same sort of characters and plots and that all the time. There's never anything, for me, to my mind at least, fresh about them and different and new. So, you know, it's an enjoyable enough paranormal romance. I've written here okay but nothing thrilling in my notes. So if you're a huge paranormal romance fan, then you'll probably enjoy it. I mean, to be fair, as I said, this was 3.5 in a series of which I've not read any of the other books, so perhaps if I'd known a bit more of the backstory about the characters, that may have helped. But it was still readable as a standalone. You could still follow the plot. Just if you're a big fan of that style, I'd say give it a look. But if you're only looking for 1 or 2 books from that genre, then it's probably not one I'd particularly recommend. Back to NetGalley and another non-fiction book. Your Creative Career by Anna Sabino. Now, this is a 3.5 star read for me. It's basically looking at the idea of what if you're someone who wants to give up the day job, start a business, doing something creative, following one of your passions. I mean, she runs a jewellery shop, so that style is more the focus. There was definitely stuff of interest in there. However, for me, when I was thinking about building my creative career as a writer, it's perhaps not as useful as it is if you are, as she is, you know, selling jewellery. You know, perhaps you want to start an Etsy shop and build the business on the side and gradually quit the day job and move into it. If that's your aim, then this is definitely a book you check out. If you're someone like me and you're not really thinking about opening shops and things, you know, I was looking at it from the point of view as an editor and a writer, and so for me the information wasn't particularly relevant all the time. But if you are someone who likes to do beading, who likes to do crochet, who wants to open a shop in those sort of areas, then this is definitely something worth looking at in this book for you. There was a good balance, I thought, of information on how to go about things, but also there's a bit of pep talking as well. You know, if you want to do this, like, you got to go for it, kind of thing. So worth looking at anyway if you're interested in turning your passion into a business. Another non-fiction that I received free as part of a MOOC that I recently did on Transmedia, and it's called Getting Started in Transmedia Storytelling by Robert Pratten. Again, a 3.5 star read for me, and a little bit similar to the last book. That's kind of because the information wasn't relevant so much for me. I'm really keen on the idea of trying some transmedia storytelling with one of my own works. I've been thinking about it for a while, but it's obviously a big undertaking. However, the information in this book is more aimed at someone who's got professional equipment at their disposal, has got money to bring people in to do different aspects. So it wasn't so much for someone like me who just wanted to have a go at it with what I could manage on my own. But it's interesting anyway, but aimed perhaps more at professionals and advanced indies as opposed to just the general public or authors like myself who are interested in trying a transmedia approach. And that brings me to the last book for the month. Now, I did a shout out to my friend Sarah earlier, and she's due another one because she sent me this book, and it is the only other 5-star read for the month. So both my 5-star reads for January came from my friend Sarah, so big thanks to her. This story is called Nocturne, and it's by Syrie James. It's a vampire story. A woman gets snowed in, there's an avalanche up in the mountains, and she's rescued by this handsome man who takes her to his home in the middle of nowhere. He's a bit distant at first, and eventually she discovers that he's a vampire. And problems ensue, of course, along with the obligatory romance. Now, this book is not going to surprise anyone. It's very predictable. You know what's going to happen in the story even before it starts. But that doesn't make it any less enjoyable. Having come from reading some non-fiction as well, I wanted just a nice, easy fiction piece to ease me back into that style of reading, and this was just the perfect one for that. I was able to flip through the pages really fast, really devour the story. I enjoyed the characters. I thought Michael and Nicole were both very well drawn. Yes, it's predictable, as I said, but that didn't stop it. That didn't stop me wanting to turn the page. There's a bit of action, and what I like most is, although there is sort of the sex romance angle, that doesn't take over the story, because so often in paranormal romance you find that it just becomes this big sex fest, and the story goes out the window a bit. But in this, it was perfectly well balanced. I thought there were some really nice, sexy scenes, but coupled with story and emotional development as well. So that's it for my January reads. At the moment, I am reading another NetGalley book. It's an historical fiction piece, so I will be telling you all about that next time. And I have a huge pile still sitting there waiting for me, so I'll be back with plenty of reviews in about 4 weeks. I look forward to seeing you all again then. Bye for now.